Well, hello.
How are you?
All right, welcome to the Edge.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, got your mic up a little bit. All right, you got the light. So you're in Santa Fe.
I'm in Santa Fe right now. I'm having a great time. I love coming out here. It's a great break from DC, and it's a great place to visit.
All right, what's you just R&R vacation, or you on business?
A little bit of both. I have family out here. I'm actually from the desert Southwest, and I have family in New Mexico. But one of the things that I'm really interested in is, making contact with some of the Native Americans out here. And I have some really good friends in some of the tribes out here, and I'm learning a lot.
Okay. And by the way, let me give a quick shout out to the new arrivals in our chat: Mickey V, Baby Wolf, Brian Ewing, Scotty, Meow M, Kathy Brown, and Geoff. I'll appreciate you logging into the Edge's chat. Well, Teresa, we're talking about sort of disclosure tonight, but it's a battle to get our government to acknowledge what seems like everyone else has already acknowledged. What is the holdup?
Well, there are multiple issues involved in disclosure. And I think one of the very first things we have to do when we talk about disclosure is we have to define what we mean by disclosure. There are multiple issues. There's the UFO issue. There's the extraterrestrial issue. There's the extraterrestrial UFO issue. And then there's the probably the government UFO issue. So we really have to define, I think, what we mean when we talk about disclosure.
Mm-hmm. Now, some people say that there was a soft disclosure with the Tic Tac video. What's your view on that?
Well, to be blunt, and I come from an Air Force family. Let me put that out there, okay? Multiple generations of my family are Air Force. And, I think the Navy got punked by the Air Force. I really do. A lot has come out, since then. I think they're very interesting videos. But I think there's a lot of new technology that they have, revealed recently, and it's making the job of UFO investigators very difficult now, because we have technology that can, replicate so much. And I'm not convinced it's extraterrestrial, but I'm convinced it's very interesting.
Okay, well, that's a good political. Are you running for office? That's the way you need to be. But I appreciate that, your thoughts on that. When I look at it, it's kind of odd that it's remaining in the frame. I always thought that they went way faster than our jets, but it appears that they were, from the video, which is kind of like they're going at the same speed.
Yeah, I've seen so many different things about that. Some people, say that the scientists who've analyzed the video have made huge mistakes. Some people have said that it's just all counter intel. Some people are saying it's extraterrestrial. Some people are saying it's foreign. Some people are saying it's ours. It's really difficult to know, and I don't know that we will ever know. And so that's part of why I am pursuing a different route now for disclosure, because I don't think we're going to get the answers that we all want from government. I think, personally, I'm focusing on a lot of Native peoples and Native peoples mythology, a lot of different religions from around the world, because I think the answers have probably been right in front of us the whole time. We just didn't have the eyes to see.
Oh, well, this is interesting. Let's go down this road a little bit. What is it about the Native American that intrigues you so much?
Well, the Hopi especially. I'm from Arizona, and I'm from Tucson. And when I was 10 years old, I had a UFO experience. I did. I saw a gold disc that glided right over the top of me. in a residential neighborhood, on the east side of Tucson, Arizona in daytime. And I still don't know what that was, but it was very significant. And when I look at a lot of the Native American religious beliefs and their mythology, this goes back very, very far. The Hopi, especially the Hopi, they live in northern Arizona. Mm-hmm. I think they have 3 mesas in northern Arizona that they live on, and they talk about the ant people, mm-hmm. who have saved them from multiple cataclysms, and the ant people come from underground. And when you read about their descriptions of the ant people, it really sounds like the Greys. I mean, it really is. It's fascinating. They also talk about the star people, mm-hmm. And this goes way back. This is a lot further back than anything that DoD has had. So to me, that's really interesting.
Well, that is interesting that you mentioned ant people, because our guest last week, Ray Szymanski, interviewed a lady who has been abducted, but she had visions or sightings of ant people running around in her room making like webs and such. And then you mentioned it this week, but among the Indian lore is also various creatures like skinwalkers, maybe portals. What's your view on those types of things?
I think there's a lot about our reality that we still don't understand. I think it's a very exciting time right now, because I think that our world's religions, I think that our history, I think the history of our world's religions, and I think our science, they're finally coming together. And I think we're going to finally start to understand that everybody has had a piece of the puzzle, and we're going to finally get to see the whole picture. Mm. At least that's what I'm hoping. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really sort of how this program rolls. If you look down our guest list, you really couldn't say, it's a UFO site, it's a religious site, it's a paranormal site. I just want to have everyone that there is out there eventually on the show that has an experience or knows something, because I feel like we'll get a little bit of truth from each one if you talk to them long enough. And maybe that's one of the groundbreaking things we try to do, is that we've had guests on the show that people would rather not be on the show. But if you don't listen to them, you'll never gain that experience that they know, and we can't judge somebody's experience unless we were actually there. But maybe there's some other things that we can glean from them. So communication seems to be a big problem that we have today. But when you talk about this project you got with Stephen Bassett about the disclosure wire, it talks about exopolitical matters. What's the definition of exopolitical?
So exopolitics is, exo is the prefix meaning, outside of Earth, so use space, and then obviously politics. So exopolitics deals with the politics of everything, extraterrestrial. And we really are going that direction. And I think it's a very exciting time right now, because we're getting ready to be an interstellar species. In fact, I read an article today, and the terminology was a triplanetary economy. And what they were talking about is an economy that isn't just the Earth, but that is going to include the Moon and Mars as well. And I think that as we expand into, space, people might start having some interesting questions, and I think the government, unfortunately, has painted themselves into a corner here, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of it. Mm.
Well, I would say they've cornered themselves in a swamp, is what I would say, become completely dysfunctional, and we out here and across the country, I mean, it seems like we've got to take matters into our own hands. We can't get any truth out of the people that be. I know not too long ago somebody asked Donald Trump about, I think it was George Stephanopoulos asked him about UFOs, and he said, I'll just leave it to the pilots. He was kind of wishy-washy on that. But then we have people like Harry Reid, who was looking into it. Seemed like he just admitted that there's things out there, and we actually had a budget for that. So, and now Hillary Clinton, I believe, said that she's going to open up the vaults, if she ever gets in, if she comes back. I'm surprised she hasn't run into a UFO on a broomstick, but That's neither here nor there. It can happen. It's not, still happen. So, anyway, there's a lot of conflicting things. Waiting on the government is just doesn't seem like we'll get anywhere doing that.
No, and it's a very sensitive issue because like I said, like I started out, there's the UFO issue, there's the extraterrestrial issue, and then there's the extraterrestrial UFO issue, and then there's the man-made UFO issue, and all of those issues are very separate. UFO does not equal extraterrestrial. Do I think that we, probably back engineered, something extraordinary that we came across? Probably. I mean, when you look at the past 100 years, we went from basically hang gliding to going to space. How did that happen? But it's a very sensitive issue. There's a lot of, especially, for the military. There's a lot of R&D that is very sensitive. We don't want necessarily other countries knowing what we have or what we don't have or what our capabilities are. And then when you get to and that's the UFO portion. And when you get to the extraterrestrial portion, it's not really the job of our government to address that. There's no legislation that's going to address the extraterrestrial issue. And just from my view, I think that, the extraterrestrial issue, I think that really falls more under religious issues and religions. I think it falls under, world history. But it's not necessarily a legislative issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we have a question for you. This is from Anita out of our live chat. She says, Teresa, how can we get beyond the Van Allen radiation belt?
That's a very good question. I've discussed this at length with a lot of people, and I don't want to fire up conspiracies, but let's think about it. 1950s technology, they didn't even have the computing power of an iPhone. But we're supposed to believe that they got past, the Van Allen radiation belt, got to the moon. I mean, and I don't want to fire up conspiracies, but that's a very good question because space radiation is going to be a huge problem for people going to the moon, for people going to Mars. Radiation is one of the biggest problems that we're going to be facing.
All right, and we have this from the Rebel Shepherd. It says, Teresa, some craft seem to be metallic construct and others have been described as light orbs. Do you think it's just technology requirements or something else?
I had a very interesting guest speaker at one of my MUFON meetings. And he was a former engineer, and I believe he had some experience with Lockheed Martin, but I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. But he was very educated. And, he gave a really interesting presentation about the various colors that people will see and how the colors will correlate to the energy output of these crafts. And there's a book about that. I don't have it in front of me because I'm out of town right now. But there's a really great book about that, and it really does describe how the various luminosities and the various colors of the luminosities really do seem to have some sort of correlation with the energy output of the crafts.
Okay, you won't say, but I will. We didn't go to the moon. All right, let's get to another question. Space Cow says, Teresa, could Trump push us into being a Type 1 civilization?
Well, I think any world leader could. The thing about this topic is it's hot. I mean, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it is not going back in. And whoever is the first to take this issue by the horns, be it another country, be it a political party, be it a political party in the United States, the first group to really take this issue is going to be the one who controls the narrative. And that is going to be extremely powerful as we go forward. It's just a matter of, it's almost like people are playing chicken right now. Who's going to be the first one to make the move?
All right. Well, this is kind of a follow-up question. You don't have to answer really. This is from DG. If you'd like to have another question, you can. But he says, "Do you think the moon landing was real? Looks like, or it was staged." So look, he wanted to come back to that. So do you want to address that again, or should we move on?
I mean, I don't know. There are good arguments on both sides, I think. Again, when you think about the computing power that they had in the 50s, my iPhone has more computing power than it did in the 1950s. Mm-hmm. And it was, it was the Cold War. We wanted to beat the Russians. I wouldn't put it past counterintelligence to say, oh yeah, hey, we just went to the moon. But again, I don't have proof of that. So I think there really are good arguments on both sides there.
Yeah, they don't have proof we landed either. I won't believe it until somebody zooms up there and sees that rover up there, okay? And I want to see that flag. I want to know why that flag was waving. But so, all right. So the state of disclosure. There's Stephen Greer's out there doing his thing, and there are others. There's the Paradigm Research Group going on with their things. Is there just all these organizations and MUFON? All these organizations going to at some point come together and sort of form a synthesis?
I wish they would, but I think there are multiple different agendas going on here. This is a very complex issue. And it's like most things, it's not black and white. There are a lot of different shades in between. There are a lot of different interests in between. Because once, I guess, disclosure happens the way people want it to happen, meaning a government official comes out and says extraterrestrials are real, that changes everything. I don't think we're going to get that. I sort of think disclosure, soft disclosure, as people will describe it, I think that's already occurred. And I think right now we're in a time when people are, processing that information, because that is the biggest paradigm change, since Copernicus, that we are not alone. It's hard to say.
Well, I might be, speaking of hybrids, a lot of people talk about hybrids out there, extraterrestrial hybrids, taking, female organs, eggs and doing various experiments and stuff. So there seems like I'm sort of a hybrid myself. I consider myself a very spiritual person, but at the same time, I'm thinking they're up there. And it really hasn't disturbed my foundational, and that's one of the things that they've always said, that chaos would ensue if they admitted, people go running in the streets, the churches would empty, people start shooting each other. I don't think that would happen, but they've always used it as an explanation. So I consider myself a hybrid in that I see both worlds, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, everyone, like we said earlier, has answers. Maybe they got an answer. I don't know. I don't know what kind of answer they have. I'll let you ask them. But and if you get any from them, call me up and let me know. But let's go to another question here for you. This is from Azure. Straight up question, because it's kind of a religious question here. Straight up question: do you believe in Jesus?
Of course, I believe in Jesus. Absolutely, I believe Jesus was real. I believe Jesus was an incredible man, and I believe Jesus is. I think he set forth an example that we should all try to follow. Absolutely.
Okay. And this one here, how about this one? This is from Jasper. We got a lot of people in our chat here. It says, Teresa, what do you think about the connection between UFOs, mysterious vanishings of people, and planes? I don't know if you know David Pilates, but he's got a whole series of books, 411, Missing 411, particularly in the national parks, which also happens to be the mecca of Bigfoot sightings, but disappearing people. What's going on?
I can only speculate on that. This issue is very complex, and it's not not everything that people want to attribute to ETs, I don't necessarily is attributable to ETs. Maybe, maybe. I think that this issue brings up a lot of ethical issues. Obviously, something's going on. I don't know what it is, and I would only be able to speculate on that. And that's not my area of expertise, but it's certainly very interesting. And I've followed David Paulides for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had him on the show. I'm trying to get him back for that new Canada book. He's a whole lot of more details of abduction. But we're talking earlier. I just mentioned like why can't these groups, the UFO organizations and legislative bodies and various parts of that sort of all get along and come to, why don't they get together and they write the rules? We're waiting for Washington to write rules, right, so to speak. But then in a microcosm of that, my wife and I are beekeepers. And in the state of Indiana, there's the Indiana State Beekeepers Association and there's a Beekeepers Association of Indiana. And they hate each other. They if they were bees, they would sting each other to death. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking, I just want to raise the little bee. I like the little bee. He flies around, he makes us honey, and he makes us money. So I love him. But no, the overriding organization, they're out there just stinging each other. No, they want to be in charge. No, they want to be in charge. I'm thinking, this beekeeping. So if we can't get the beekeepers together, Teresa, is there any hope?
Right. Yeah. If we can't get the beekeepers together, how are we going to get government together? That's why I'm saying I don't think the answers are necessarily going to come from government. I think some of what we're seeing is, like I said before, we're about to become an interstellar species. We really are. We're sending people to the moon, the Artemis mission in 2024, and we have plans to send people to Mars in 2030. And, I think a lot of the crafts that people have seen are probably, black technology. I really do. That does not mean that extraterrestrials aren't real. It doesn't mean they haven't been here. It's not mutually exclusive. But now that people will, and tourists will be going to space. They're going to be seeing things. And, so I think that... I think that a lot of what people have been seeing have probably been black projects, spacecraft. Mm-hmm. We have a Space Force now. Yay. Mm-hmm. How exciting. Yeah. And, I think that accounts for quite a bit, but that still doesn't rule out extraterrestrials. Mm.
Yeah, on that Space Force, quite coincidentally, the logo looks like a Star Trek logo.
Yeah.
Now, have you testified before Congress?
I have not testified before Congress. I've spoken to many people in Congress, mm-hmm. and a lot of their aides and a lot of their friends, but I have not testified before Congress. We've not had congressional testimony on this issue, and I don't know if we will, because like I said, what are we asking for? Do we want to know what the UFOs are, or do we want to know if extraterrestrials exist? The UFOs, I think we're probably going to find out, are advanced crafts that are probably back engineered. And then again, with the extraterrestrial issue, I'm not necessarily sure it's the job of the government to tell us about that. And if there were any branch of government to address the extraterrestrial issue, I think it would be NASA, because mm-hmm. NASA really does have there's an arm of NASA that is responsible for public education. So I think that's where that would fall under. I think we'd have to be very, very specific about what we want from Congress.
Mm-hmm. I was a little bit saddened when Obama first came into office, and I'm a NASA fan, man. Look, I used to build, my favorite model when I was a kid was a Saturn V rocket, man. I love that thing, man. I want to go on that thing, and so I build those and I have them sitting around, and I was thinking, man, this is the coolest stuff ever. But then Obama goes in there and he's turning the mission, because talk about NASA's mission, and he turns it into what he called a Muslim outreach effort. I'm thinking, what the hell does that got to do with going into space? So I was hoping maybe Trump would bring it back and put it back to their mission. I mean, I think the creation of the Space Force is one thing. I mean, why don't we have a lander on Mars by now? I know we got that little rover up there. Or do you think that's just Photoshop?
Well, I don't know. There are a lot of countries now who have been to the moon. You know, the Indians, the Chinese. The Chinese have the Jade Rabbit. And I believe the Chinese landed on the far side of the moon, which I don't know that I think they're the first ones to do that. So I do believe people really are going to the moon now. I hadn't heard about what you mentioned with Obama, but I think Trump has a really good opportunity here, and I really hope I hope that Trump or an advisor is listening, because the extraterrestrial issue is inevitable. Whether it is finding bacteria on the moon or Mars, that is still a giant revelation. It's huge, Just that alone changes everything. And I think Trump has a really good opportunity here to kind of get out in front of things and, take the bull by the horns, like I said, because this is an incredibly powerful political issue. And the first one to control the narrative is going to be very powerful.
Well, I would agree with you on that. And I would also say by demonstration, Trump has shown that he could literally turn the world upside down. He's overturned trade deals that have been on the books forever, and the economy's been turned over overnight. So why couldn't that sort of chutzpah, or whatever you want to call it, force or drive, be put to that? I feel if he put what he does with other things to that, we'd already be sitting on Mars. But I got to be careful here, though, Teresa, because you said something about the Chinese may be up there first. I think I remember seeing a movie, it might have been called Apollo 18, something about these weird moon rocks, okay? They saw these moon rocks start moving around. But we got Corona going on out there, and there could be something out there in the planets, and the Chinese have already got contaminated and brought it back and called it Corona.
Or it could have come from extraterrestrials. I talked to a lot of... I talked to a lot of people in D.C. I talked to a lot of people. I mean, Washington, D.C. is there are a lot of great things about it. It's a very educated population, a lot of very well-connected people. And I've talked to a lot of people, one of whom suggested that the Ebola actually was an extraterrestrial disease that got out of a lab. So like I said, there's so many issues involved with this. It truly will, once we really open Pandora's box, we're going to find out. It's going to reach aspects of our lives that we never even considered. Now, I don't know if Ebola came from extraterrestrials, but the person that mentioned that to me was in a place to know some of those things.
I mentioned about testifying in Washington, D.C. I'm going to get out of the picture for a second because I've got this slide I was able to capture here. Now, I think I can't verify the veracity of this picture. I think they called me to testify. It could be Photoshop. I don't know which. I don't know. I thought I was dreaming. But I thought they called me for my great intellect and knowledge to explain to them, and it was a tough day too. There was a lot. They grilled me, So I don't know. I mean, I think I was there.
Well, I think you should be there when that day comes. I definitely think you should be there.
All right, let's get to another question for you. Anita says, Teresa, you ever been abducted?
I don't think that I have been abducted. I've certainly had some very bizarre experiences, and like I said, when I was 10 years old, I saw a disc, and it was gold. And that's very unusual. Most people report some sort of silver metallic, but what I saw was gold metallic. And if it had just been that one incident, maybe I could have written it off, but that was sort of the beginning of a lot of really bizarre incidents, and it's not just me. It actually goes back really far in my family, and a lot of generations. And again, I don't know what that means. I didn't ask, to be in the middle of this. But here I am, and it changed my life. When you see something that extraordinary, it really does. It changes your entire life. It changes your whole worldview, and so much of what I've done in my life, in the past 30 years, since then, has been to try to understand what it was that I saw and what I experienced. I think it's entirely possible that people are getting abducted. I mean, if you even just look in the Bible, it seems very clear that people were having encounters, and they used the language that they had at the time to describe, what they were experiencing. So I do think that happens. I don't know. I can't say for sure that I've been abducted, but I certainly have had some very interesting experiences.
Was it like this golden craft here?
It wasn't that big, but it was gold like that, and it was a very similar shape, although it was smooth. The only time I've seen something that is very similar to what I saw, I was watching National Geographic with my daughter on TV, and they began talking about a Buddhist temple in Thailand, and your viewers can look it up. It's called the Temple of 1,000,000 Buddhas, and it is a gold disc that looks like a UFO, and it's made out of 1,000,000 golden Buddhas, and it's in Thailand. When I saw that on TV, I nearly fell off the couch because I had never seen anything close to what I had seen before. And, 30 years later, I was seeing this on TV, and I thought, oh my gosh, and that's halfway around the world. What did the Buddhists in Thailand, what was the inspiration? Yes, there it is. Yeah, what was the inspiration for that? That's incredible, because that's very similar to what I saw. So someday, if anybody wants to fund me, I would like to go to Thailand. I would like to go and speak to the Buddhist nuns, and I want to find out, what was their inspiration for that, and I want to tell them about my experience, and I would like to know what they would have to say about that.
Somebody says that doesn't look like that was cheap.
Yeah, probably not. 1,000,000 golden Buddhas. That can't be cheap.
Ooh, all right, Randy Bauer, have you heard about stopping abductions using the name of Jesus? We've had a lot of people that have tried various things. So there's something out there called Orgon. I don't know if you ever heard that. You think that's a joke, but who knows? They use that. Incantations. Some people use the name of Jesus. Have you ever met an abductee?
So when I resigned from MUFON, but when I was the Maryland MUFON director, I heard that quite a bit. And I still spend a great portion of my day talking to people from around the world who have had experiences, abduction experiences, experiences in their bed. I mean, just experiences in general. And that is a very popular recurring theme, that when they invoke the name of Jesus Christ, the experience stops. I don't know what to make of that, but I certainly have heard that from more than one person. Okay.
Put y'all away first out of the live chat. This is Teresa. Do we have bases on other planets?
Oh, I don't have any direct knowledge of that. I would only be able to speculate on that. But, knowing our government and how many trillions of dollars went missing from the Pentagon, and now we have a Space Force. And then remember, too, there was Gary McKinnon, the British young man who managed to hack into NASA, and he found names of off-world officers. So would I be surprised if we had bases already off-world? I would not be surprised.
Now, you just ventured into conspiracy land there, slipping that little missing trillions out of the NASA there, Teresa.
Well, there was definitely some accounting issues there, and nobody's accounted for that money yet. So,
okay. Okay, I'll go there. They took it. All right, here we go. What do you think about the various orbs that are seen? I think we addressed this earlier. You said it's a matter of power that's needed or frequency, something.
Yeah, I think there's a few different things going on. There's so much black R&D, research and development that's going on. It's really hard to say what people are seeing all the time. Mm-hmm. One of the theories is that, like I mentioned before, the crafts, depending on their energy output, it changes their color, it changes their luminescence, and then I think, sometimes people are seeing government experiments, really advanced black technology is going to look paranormal. Mm-hmm. And we know they've done stuff with plasma. We know they've done a lot of stuff. So it's hard to say always, or definitively what people are seeing every time. But I've seen a lot of very interesting pictures.
And I always see on this show when we get talking about orbs and stuff, a lot of times they're referred to as UFOs, and I don't see those as UFOs. I mean, maybe some device to sense an area, but I can't imagine there's like beings on those little orbs, though orbs always seem to kind of exist at the same time that the craft exists. So I don't know if they're sending them out or what they do with them. Yeah,
it's almost, I've heard from more than one person. I've heard from multiple people, that they have seen small orbs that come to them either like to the window or in their bedroom. In fact, I used to speak with one gentleman who talked about an orb that approached him in his bedroom, and it had a face in it, and it made a huge impression on this guy. I mean, he was, in his 40s. This happened to him as a teenager, and he was still talking about that. Those are the kinds of stories you can't just write off. I've heard of other orbs that are large, really like as big as a car. It's really hard to say. I've heard that some of the black triangles have orbs that accompany them. It's almost like it's an advanced scout drone or something, right, that people, that's going out. But I've not experienced that, but I've heard a lot of people who describe that, or orbs that will appear in groups, and almost like as if they're being observed by these orbs. Mm-hmm. So it can't be discounted, because I've heard that quite a bit, and it goes back to Native American mythology. In Phoenix, where they had the Phoenix Lights. Mm-hmm. There in the rocks, in the mountains there are petroglyphs that appear to depict orbs, and so orbs are very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Also seems to be orbs when there's paranormal activity in general too. Say like ghost hunts always seem to be accompanied by orbs, so I don't think they're relegated. Of course, maybe they know the same things the alien do. But back to the first hour, we were talking when you sort of introduced yourself. You were mentioning the Indians, and I've always admired them for their spirituality. People say, well, they over spiritualize things. I think that most people don't spiritualize enough. I think there's a whole lot more going on around us, and then, over time, if we sort of develop our senses and awareness, we may be able to see a whole lot more of what's going on around us. Maybe that's why some people see Bigfoot, some people don't, or ghosts or angels. I mean, those types of things. But Indians always seem to have, they and plus they appreciate animals much more than we do. If they kill an animal to eat, they thank the animal, for his sacrifice and such. And I was reading today that China is getting ready to say if you don't turn your dog in, they're going to cull them. They're going to cull various groups of animals. I was thinking, what is going on? Who wants to kill all? Humans, we're almost like in charge of the earth. And all we can come up with is kill stuff. If we're not killing each other, we're killing the animals. And it bugs the crap out of me, Teresa.
I agree with you completely. I think that's one of the things that Jesus was. And again, I don't want to get too controversial. But personally, I believe that's one of the things that Jesus was trying to teach us. He was trying to teach us to be good stewards of each other and to be good stewards of the earth. And, in all life, all life is connected. Everything is energy, whether it is a solid object or, whether it's heat coming off a fire. Everything is energy in a different form. Energy doesn't go away. It just changes form. And I completely agree with you. I think it's very important to have respect for energy in all of its forms. And I saw the article that you were referring to about the Chinese having to give up their dogs, and it was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. I couldn't even imagine.
But this question, this is from our link. There are several ways that people send in questions. This is from Ray. It says, Teresa, now, I know you said that you're no longer with MUFON, but maybe you know something about this. When will MUFON stop being a nuts and bolts organization and take seriously what real contactees say they have happened to them, not referring to Billy Meyer? So I guess there are famous names out there. I mean, there's Travis Walton, Beth and Barn Hill, was it? I mean, there's a lot of people that have been abducted. So what is he saying, that MUFON doesn't really go with abductees? What's he talking about?
Well, I think that's that's a big conversation that people are having right now. Ufology has been about nuts and bolts for the past 70 years, and we're still not any further down the line. I think one of the things I hear people talk a lot about, and I agree with, is we really need to be listening to the people, to the contactees. We really need to be getting the contactees and the experiencers together, because there has got to be a commonality in the messages that they are receiving. There has got to be a commonality, in their experiences. And I think we should be paying more attention to those people and less attention to the nuts and bolts, because that's just not going anywhere right now. That's going to come down the line. But I really think that it would be a good thing to get the contactees, to get the experiencers together and see if there is a unified message that comes from all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to the biblical narrative and animals, where God told Adam, he said, look, here's your animals. Go ahead and name them. It didn't seem like he instructed him to kill them, without reason, or to hunt them like for trophies. I never did like that either. So, all right. Let's get some more questions for you, Teresa. We have this here. Max Vogan says, Teresa, did you see the UFO come down on the Dome of the Rock temple?
I have seen that video, and it is one of the most incredible videos I've ever seen, because there are multiple angles to that video. I think 2 or 3 different people, recorded that event, and it was incredible. It truly was. And I think that's one of the most impressive, groups of videos out there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned Phoenix Lights. We had Dr. Lynn Katai on this program. She's one of the preeminent people that videotaped a lot of those lights there. And that was so interesting, how, talking about government cover-ups, first they said, it was weather balloons, and they said it was, somebody was having a party, and they sent up some heated lamps or whatever they do, like those Chinese things, and Chinese lanterns. It's like, oh, come on, man, quit being ridiculous. And then there's all these people said the sky was blacked out over Phoenix when this object was going over the top, and they said, well, there's nothing happening. And then they said it was referring to the Stevensville gigantic UFO sighting. They said it was a reflection from an airplane that people saw. Now, how do you mistake a big object blocking out the sun in the sky as a reflection of another airplane? It's like they really take the population as being pretty stupid.
They can be very patronizing, and that really rubs people the wrong way. And I agree with you completely, because I'm sure you remember the governor, I think it was Fife Symington. Mm-hmm. He did a press conference on that. And then he had an aide come out in a little alien, suit, and he was trying to make a joke out of it. Yeah. And people really weren't laughing. It's not funny. people really want the truth. How we're going to get that truth is the question. I'm not sure that it's going to come from government. Again, I think maybe, some of that truth has been in front of our eyes the entire time. We just didn't have the right perception to see.
All right. This is from Max again. It says, Teresa, do you belong to an ancient religion?
Do I belong to an ancient religion? I don't know. So I'm baptized a Mormon. I am not. I'm not a very good Mormon. I'm not a practicing Mormon right now. I do think they have a large piece of the puzzle. I come from a Protestant family. In fact, I am. Many of the Protestants out there will know who William Tyndale was. He was the first one to translate the Bible into English in defiance of the King of England and also the Catholic Church. And he was burned alive for doing that in England, and this was in the 1400s.
Are you related to him?
I'm directly related to him. He is a direct uncle, and so when I think about my own contact experiences and how motivating that has been for me in my life, I mean, and anybody else who's had contact experiences knows there is a drive. There is a drive that comes from within to figure it out. And so when I look back on my family history and I look at William Tyndale, I think it's very possible that he too could have been a contactee. He gave his life to translate the Bible into English. At that time, people had to pay the Catholic Church to read the Bible to them from, I believe, from Latin. And so he revolutionized Christianity. And, I really wonder what happened to him that gave him that kind of motivation.
Now, you say he was burned at the stake?
He was burned alive at the stake. Yes, sir.
Seemed like there was another guy, was it John Wycliffe, I think, translated the Bible, and the Pope was so mad at him after they buried him 50 years later, they dug him up and burned him again. That's how much that's how much they hated that guy. It's like, dude, so I got a little problem with the Pope, man. I'm kind of pissed off at the Pope right now. All right. In fact, because there's a video of him slapping some woman going down a line of people.
I saw that video. Oh my gosh. How do you even justify that? I have many wonderful Catholic friends, but that was something on that video. But the Catholic Church has made statements, as I'm sure you know, and I'm sure a lot of your followers know. I think probably about 10 years ago, the Catholic Church came out and said, that they believe there's extraterrestrial life. And in fact, the new director of Maryland MUFON, Mark Gasherney, he's Catholic, and he wrote to, I believe it was the astronomers in Arizona, because, the Catholic Church has a huge telescope in Arizona. I believe it's on Mount Graham.
Yep.
And he wrote to them to ask them about, if they had an official position on the existence of extraterrestrial life. And they emailed him back. And I've posted that a few times on my social media, but basically the gist of what they said was, yes, we believe that there is other life out there. It's part of our tenets. And, so the Catholics have addressed it, I think, a few times.
Yeah. Now, somebody said that their telescope is named Lucifer. I don't know.
I've heard that, too. I don't know if that's true, but it's awfully interesting that they have such a huge telescope out in the middle of the desert. What are they looking for?
Yeah. Well, we mentioned skinwalkers earlier in the program, talking about Indians, how that they have these spiritual intuitions and sightings and various such. Overbill Automotive says, have you ever heard of any dogman encounters when dealing with the Indians?
No, I haven't heard a lot about that. I mean, not personally. I've seen stuff on TV, in TV shows about those types of things, but I find that very interesting because when we look back at different societies around the world, all throughout time, even if you go back to the ancient Egyptians, you will see what look like hybrid dogmen people. But we don't see that every day, So where is that coming from? Mm-hmm. It seems to be an archetype that persists. So where is that coming from? I find that very interesting.
All right. And this question here, Jim says, Teresa, what's the strangest UFO experience you can talk about?
Oh, the strangest UFO experience. Wow. I don't know. I think they're all strange, I don't know that there's a normal UFO experience, and a lot of them seem to be so individualized too. Certainly there are patterns, that persist throughout these UFO and, ET encounters. Mm-hmm. I can tell you about an investigation that I participated in Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
We went out. There was a woman, and it was a MUFON investigation. And she called Virginia MUFON, and she's extremely distraught. And so we drove out like 4 hours each way. It was the border of Virginia and Tennessee. And the poor woman, as she was recounting, her experience, you could see her hands were shaking, she was sweating, her pupils dilated, and, she talked about seeing a large gray, a tall gray, appear in her kitchen. And what really got me was she described her dog's reactions. She said that it was her dogs that saw this tall gray in her kitchen before she did. And she said the hair was standing up on their backs. And then she said that she got up to see what the dogs were growling at. And she saw a tall gray. He had his hand up on the wall in her kitchen. And the dogs were barking, and he lifted his hand up like that. And the dogs just sat down and stopped barking. And she said it terrified her. And she really was. She was pretty terrified. And even when we got there, about a week later, it was still really upsetting for her. So when you see the witnesses and you see and you can feel, the emotions that are very real, these people are, they're definitely experiencing something. I believe it 100%.
Well, I wasn't there, and it's disturbing me. Let me ask you, do you know Chase Klosky?
I do know Chase, yes.
Yeah, she's been on a show a few times. Boy, does she have a harrowing story of encounters of the third kind, I think, maybe fourth kind, looking down and seeing a little gray alien. I don't think I want to meet one, but I think if I did, Teresa, some kind of violence would break out.
I can't even imagine what it would be like. I think she described seeing a gray in a cornfield. That's the incident that you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say because, some people will say that they get a telepathic message that everything is okay and to calm down. Some people will describe, extraterrestrials that look like us, and that blend right in. But one of the consistent things that people describe is this telepathic part of the experience. And people seem to get messages from that, and they think initially they're terrified, and a lot of times they'll get this telepathic message that everything's okay, calm down, and then they feel calmed by that. I don't think Chase felt that way. I think from what I've heard, Chase described that she was terrified, and I'm sure I would be too. I think I'd probably pee my pants.
Okay. Have you ever done any research in Men in Black cases from Raul?
From where?
The Raul is one who sent that in. Have you done any Men in Black cases, studied them?
So Men in Black, yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of lore about that. I've heard a lot of people speak about the Men in Black at conferences. The lore goes that they are not entirely human. I don't know what to think about that. I know that I've certainly had a lot of encounters with with people from the intelligence community, because when you start poking around and asking questions about R&D and UFOs and secret technology, they want to know what you're doing. So I don't know what to think about the Men in Black thing. It's very interesting though, and especially that hotel video where you see them entering that hotel. I think it was in Canada, or it was somewhere up north, I think. But that's a very interesting video. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that.
Clearly they were Men in Black, but what scares me even more is black-eyed children. I don't know if they're the spawn, the evil spawn of the Men in Black. I don't know, but don't want to deal with them either.
I don't want to see those either.
Wow, here we go. This is a very important question here, and it has to go directly to your credibility. So Anita wants to know, do you drink tea or coffee?
Oh, I'm a tea drinker, Anita.
Wow, that's going to split this audience right in half, man.
I hope that was the right answer. I love a great Earl Grey.
Yeah. All right. Oh, Earl Grey. All right. Know what you're saying there. All right. We got this. What's your? Okay. Now I'm not answering that. I'm not going to ask that question. So somebody put an LO in there. We're going to leave that one alone. Moving along. Rose says, Teresa, I've had a lot of alien encounters. How can I find out if I was ever abducted? Now, some people may not ever know that they've been abducted.
Yeah, that very well could be. And that's the frightening part, but I think it's frightening because we're just now starting to see this in a different language. I think people have been dealing with these things for centuries. I mean, look at the Bible. Look all around the world at all of the world's religions. I think the hard part that we're dealing with now is recognizing that we are part of a much larger ecosystem. Not just globally, but galactically. And I think it's normal. I think it's natural. I think it has always been. But I think because we're just now, our technology and our language and our science is just now getting to the point where we can accurately describe what's really happening. I think that's really shocking to people. But I think that whoever they are, I think they've been around for a very long time.
Yeah, there does seem to be like sort of an ancient aspect to them. It's kind of weird. But you're right. If you look at the petroglyphs and ancient writings of all kinds, there always seems to appear even the classic almond-shaped, bug-eyed looking creatures as if they were seeing them. Now they weren't watching ancient aliens back then. I'm pretty sure. Right. So where did they get those caricatures from?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I've switched my focus, my research focus. I feel like I have pursued, I've pursued the government, the DOD aspect, very far. I've pursued it to Congress. I've talked to people, and a lot of Congress people are very interested. I mean, they really are. But I don't know that that's where we're going to get our answers from. So that's why, I'm still working in DC, and I still have my contacts. I'm still working that. But my personal interest right now is looking more at the native peoples and what their beliefs are about this, because I think they've known about it all along.
Do you plan on writing any books?
I've got about 10 books floating around in my head. It's just a matter of sitting down and getting them out. I gave a presentation in November at at Mysteries of Space and Sky. That's an annual conference in Maryland. And, I spoke about archetypes. And I talked about how there are patterns within the UFO, within the extraterrestrial, within the experiencer experiences that go back to the very beginning of time, and they don't make any sense whatsoever, yet they persist. Like, one example is the praying mantis extraterrestrials. People will describe these giant bugs, and it makes absolutely no sense. It sounds entirely crazy, but yet when you look back, in history, if you go to Africa, the African Bushmen actually have one of their gods is a praying mantis. Why is that? That's really bizarre. And why does that persist even up until modern day? Because it just doesn't make any logical sense, yet it persists. And so that's a lot of the research that I've done, and that's the book that I'm working on.
All right. Barbara Briggs says, Teresa, have you seen any of the Fall Brothers films, Hollow Earth, Higher Entities?
No, I don't think I'm familiar with those films. I'll have to. What did you say they're called? I'll look that up.
Yeah, it's from the Fall Brothers, Hollow Earth, and Higher Entities.
Okay, I will look that up. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I do it a lot of times too. When I see something come through the show, I keep notes right here, man, just in case something hits me and I want to follow through myself. The question came in. It says, do you think that the aliens are extraterrestrial or interdimensional?
I think that I think that it would be logical to assume that they are both. Because if you're going to be traveling such long distances, in space, you're almost going to have to, first of all, you're going to have to go faster than the speed of light. And even then, it's going to take you forever. So I do think that somehow they're able to punch through another dimension and then pop right back out. So I think they're interconnected. Mm-hmm. I think it would make sense that they're interconnected.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then now, what's going on with this disclosure wire? What do you guys? What's this project all about with you and Stephen Bissett?
Well, so that excuse me. So that got put on. Excuse me. I need to get a drink for a minute. So, disclosure wire is a very exciting project. It got put on hold for a little while because Washington, D.C. right now, as everybody knows, is a giant wreck, and nothing is going to it's just a mess right now. But disclosure wire is very exciting. So Steve has secured an office in the National Press Building, and it is there it is, and it is the first time anybody has ever secured an office in Washington, D.C. to put on a video podcast about disclosure. It will be the first video podcast out of Washington, D.C. on the issue of disclosure. We had intended to start it at the beginning of last year, but with the total mess that is occurring right now in DC, nothing that has to kind of calm down before anybody's going to pay attention to anything else. So I think the plan right now is to just wait until things calm down and then get that going. He still has the office. It's great. It's very exciting. It's really fun being in the National Press Building, and it's really cool to talk to the other reporters in the National Press Building because, it's not just American reporters. In the National Press Building, there are offices for media from around the world. So once it gets going, it really, it's going to get very big, and it's been really fun to talk to people, because people want to talk about this. Like you were saying earlier, how the powers that be think that we're not ready for this. I completely disagree, because when I talk to people in Washington, D.C., or in Santa Fe, or anywhere, in the airport, anywhere around the world, people are interested. They want more information. They're open to this idea. They believe, and they're not scared. They're not going to riot in the streets. They're not going to go shooting guns off into the sky. People want to talk about this. And if our politicians would finally listen that people really want to talk about these issues and they really want more information, whoever takes control of that narrative has got the power.
And that is really despicable. The gridlock and the infighting. It's like, you'd think Congress would be an example, lead, in civility and in intelligence and cooperation, but they're none of that. They're like a bunch of little kids. It's like, who put these people in charge? And these people, we got it backwards. They think that they're in charge of us, but frankly, we're in charge of them. They're way past the idea that they work for us. They're this maternal instinct that whatever they say to roll out a program, and hey, if 50,000 people or 100,000 lose their jobs, we'll make another program. And this, like, they just sit around and manipulate things, but they've shown that they are so
dysfunctional.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be in charge of anything. They shouldn't be in charge of dog catching. I don't know. And these people in charge of trillions of dollars worth of programs that they dole out to manipulate people, and nobody wants all that going on. People want to live their lives. And one thing that really makes me mad, Teresa, is that China's got, I don't know how many high-speed trains going 185 miles an hour, and I don't think this country has a single one. And why is that? That goes back to earlier when we were talking about Trump. And I'm not just sitting here saying Trump this, Trump that, but he has shown that he can get stuff done even if the entire Congress is just sitting around fighting. So if they got together, what could we do in this country? Would we already know about what's going on up there? Wouldn't we already have high-speed trains and maglev cars? But no, we have deteriorating cities. We have feces all over San Francisco. People have been weaponized to fight each other. That's why they can't talk to each other. And so, and they just sit around and say, we'll fix it after they create it. And it's really, it just goes around and round and round. And I'm done. Go ahead.
No, Daniel, you were exactly right. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I get very frustrated with that. I travel a lot. I've traveled to a lot of countries, a lot of different countries. And it's really frustrating, like you just said, to go to another country and to see they have high-speed bullet, trains, that are just 1,000 times better than anything we have, and we barely even have Amtrak.
Right.
I mean, where's the money going? It's really aggravating. And like you said, what are they doing? We are electing these people to serve us. But where is all this money going? Mm-hmm. It's not going to us. Our cities are deteriorating. Like you said, on the West Coast, we have horrible homeless problem, drug problems. Why, these are problems we can fix, but we have to be, I think, like you said, we need to be less divided. And I'm very sad about that right now. I come from multiple generations of military family, and, they all fought for this country, and they did not fight for this country for us to be so divided. And I understand why we're so divided, and I see both sides, have some good points. At some point, however, we have to come back together, and I truly think that the extraterrestrial issue and the issue of UFOs, I think that's one of the issues that could bring us back together. Mm-hmm. Because when I was doing my MUFON meetings, it was very encouraging for me to see far right people, far left people, but they could still all come together because they want to know about the aliens, and I do too. So that's one of the issues, and I really think, I really hope that Trump takes that up. If he doesn't, I think it's a lost opportunity, because somebody will. And the person who does take up that issue is going to be the one that's really going to unite people and control the narrative.
Well, that's well said there. When you were saying that, Teresa, I was thinking back to Reagan's his speech back at the UN, where he said, maybe we need an alien invasion. Would not the countries of the earth then join together as a unified force against them? Of course, many people saying he was basically saying that they're here, but I think in reality, the actual reality was probably saying, what's it going to take for this planet to stop fighting? And, I don't know how familiar you are with this show, but we've, as I said earlier in the first hour, we've had such a variety of guests. And so we've had guests on that believe that the earth is moving into a higher vibration and this and that and the other. And I said, well, how are we moving in a higher vibration if we still have endless Mideast wars? I said, the only people that believe that maybe are people in this country, but overseas, it's not like that. I mean, they would kill you while you're saying, can we all get together? I said, sure we can. We're going to kill you. And, I mean, there's the distance we have to go as humans is so far. It's a little bit depressing to me, but maybe we do need an extraterrestrial sort of invasion of some sort of revelation, something for people to say, our problems are really pretty petty that we disagree with. And then I'm going back on my high horse here again. Why is there starving still in Africa? We got all the technology we need to make that whole country this Garden of Eden, but they're over there killing each other, and the Middle East is blowing itself up. And it just seems like we have the technology to solve all these problems, but humans can't. There's something about humans that they just won't get to that place. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're exactly right. And, that you just really hit the nail on the head there about one of the major issues that I really lobby for is the technology. We have the technology to solve so many problems. We have the technology to get off of fossil fuels. We have the technology to solve an energy crisis where everybody in the world could have energy. We have advanced medical technology. We have nanotechnology. I mean, imagine if you have cancer and they have the nanotechnology where you just take a pill and the nanotechnology goes and attacks the tumor. That exists. And they're not releasing this stuff. There are materials. I had a gentleman approach me last year. He had an aortic aneurysm, and he was going to die. And he really wanted to know if I knew anything about some of these new materials that they have, because they can repair like something like an aortic aneurysm and extend life. So that's one of the biggest issues here, and that's what really gets me is we have a lot of this technology. We're not releasing it. People are dying, and that's very unethical. I understand why, the arguments about why we keep some of these things secret. I understand the national security implications. I understand all of that. However, if it's your family member who would be benefiting from something like this, how do you argue? How do you argue that that's okay to withhold life-saving technology? So that is probably the biggest thing that when I talk to people in Congress, that I bring up with them, and they agree. They see the points. It's just a matter of getting it through the Washington D.C. machine, and it's not efficient. Anybody who's worked in government knows the bureaucracy is very frustrating.
Well, yeah, and I see if you work in that, you've seen that firsthand. But referring back to that sort of whether you agree with this as being legitimate or not, this TikTok so-called video, this was years old, and so like it just comes out. I mean, it reminds me of 9/11. I'm going conspiracy on you. The first pictures that were released from the Pentagon was 5 years later, and there was 3 pictures, and they had the wrong date on them. This is what we get from our government. And every time you try to get information from them, they say, that's protected, under national security. You do a Freedom of Information Act, it takes forever, or they just simply say that's not covered. Who put them in charge? We know they lie to us, and I'm sick of it. They need to err on the side of letting the information out, and we let us make a decision and quit treating the public like children. They don't look. They've shown us they don't have the ability to make good decisions, and they need not to be in charge of information. We need to be in charge of that information and decide what to do with it. Somehow we can't get through. That's a wall that we just can't seem to get through.
No, I completely agree with you. The bureaucracy it's extremely frustrating. The whole system is very dysfunctional. I think we're all seeing that right now. I don't know what the answer is to make it work better and to benefit more people, because I think at the end of the day, what we all want the exact same things. We want to have our families. We want to, be healthy. We want to be happy. We want to go to work. We want to raise our kids. We want to raise our grandkids. And if there is technology that can make that better and that can make that easier for people and that can enhance our lives, how is it ethical to withhold that? And I get a lot of flack for saying that because of anytime they don't want to talk about anything, it's national security. Mm-hmm. And there is validity to that. There really is. However, there's a happy medium somewhere, and I hope at some point somebody starts to release some of those things. And I think as we move into space, I think we will see more of those technologies come out, because I think a lot of those things are space technologies. Mm-hmm. And as they start to utilize that in space, I think that those technologies will trickle down to everybody and will enhance our lives if we wait that long.
Well, I agree with you there. And for those of us who believe there may be reversed alien technology out there that they have, there seem to be sitting on it. And, in fact, I mentioned in a guest here a couple of weeks ago that I'm hoping that if America's attacked, say, that we have this advanced technology that we're sitting on, maybe we can use it to protect the civilization, or population. But there just seems to be the advanced technology that they're not releasing to help people. I agree with you there. We're still on fossil fuels because they want it that way, and so that's just a chess piece. They're just moving us around. Okay, we want fossil fuel for this amount of time, and we want these people to fight over here. I mean, that's what happened in the Middle East. Bureaucrats decided, well, if we pit this group against that group, then we come in there with some weapons over here, and they come around over here. I mean, they just manipulate these countries like that, and we end up with this chaos, and they're completely responsible for it. And when it doesn't work and it's a disaster, they go, oh, we need some new policies. Duh. We need them to get the hell out of there is what we need to do. All right, Australian Ben says, Teresa, after disclosure, humanoid aliens arrive and are beautiful. Is it conceivable that hundreds of millions of people decide to marry these humanoids and leave Earth?
Well, I don't know. I think probably anything is possible if the aliens show up in mass, and again, to go back to the Bible, it talks about the fallen angels. They found the daughters of men to be attractive, and, they basically had children with them. So, I don't know if some super incredible alien man just walked through the door right now and swept me off my feet. I can't say I wouldn't go.
Wow. Didn't see that one coming. Well, man, it can happen. It can happen. I mean, I would say if it's a man in black, I'd stay away from that. Just some dating advice there. Okay. So, all right. So you're leaning toward the Indians and their history and such. And you say you have like Indian people that you're networking with, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so I have. I've made a few friends on a few different reservations, and I keep in touch with them. And when I come to Santa Fe, I meet with them. We have lunch. In fact, one of my Zuni friends made me a beautiful ring, and it was incredibly thoughtful. I don't know. I'll hold it up here. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, let's see it.
can you see that there? There's a gold drop right there.
Right.
And that signifies the gold UFO that I saw.
Okay.
And underneath is me.
All right.
And then there's a silver band that goes around the entire ring. There's a lightning bolt that represents adversity that I will experience in my life, but the silver band is my life path. And it was incredibly thoughtful. And when I talk to a lot of my Native American friends, you know, they know. I mean, they don't doubt me. They've had, you know, a lot of them have had their own experiences, and they know. So it's very nice to talk to them. It's enlightening to talk to them, and I'm really hoping to be able to get out to one of the reservations here soon, because I really would like to talk to some of the elders about their experiences and about my own, because I really do think that, you know, they've been around a lot longer than we have. You know, the Hopis say they've been through, I believe, you know, 4 different worlds. And there's a lot of wisdom there that I think that has really been overlooked.
Well, I'll tell you, that's if somebody finds they're going to talk to me for any reason, they already know. When they talk to Daniel, you're not going to hear about the weather. You're not going to hear about a latest book. I'm always veering right into some kind of spiritual or extraterrestrial. So, you know, when you talk about being in the National Press building there, I'm sure you guys have the fun stuff to talk about, because their crap is just messed up. You know, maybe they need to hear from you guys to say, wow, man, there's something else going on out there, and the stuff we're dealing with is pretty petty. Well, Teresa Tindal, we're getting near the end of the broadcast, and anything you'd like to say as we sort of wrap this up?
I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. I would like to thank all of your watchers who have, submitted questions. You can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Tindal, Tindal, Teresa, Teresa. And I also have a Facebook page, Capital Disclosure. And you're not going to find me getting into a lot of the woo. I really try to stay with the science of what we can prove. But it's very exciting times, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. Thank you.
All right, Teresa, appreciate you being on the show. Can we have you on again sometime?
All right, that would be great, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Okay, stay safe out there.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, everybody.